Hey everyone, I'm so glad to see you all. By the way, where are you watching from? I'm from Texas, America. Write in the comments, I look forward to your comments. It's so exciting to know where you're all from. A nurse notices a weird smell, finds yellow stains on a black woman, and contacts 911. It was the start of another long night shift for Jenny Moore, a seasoned nurse with 8 years of experience working in the downtown hospital's emergency department. She knew these shifts all too well, the slow hours that somehow still felt exhausting, the steady hum of fluorescent lights, and the unpredictable nature of the cases that walked through the doors. The hospital never really slept, but it had moments of eerie quiet between emergencies. That evening, Jenny hoped for a quiet night, one without surprises, but fate had other plans. Just after 10 p.m., a new patient arrived. Jenny noticed her name on the chart, Sarah Thompson. She was listed as a walk-in, brought in by a concerned neighbor who found her barely responsive at home. No ambulance had been called. Jenny had seen countless patients in various states of distress, so she didn't think much of it at first. However, as she walked down the dimly lit hallway towards Sarah's room, a strange unease settled in her stomach. Something didn't feel right. The patient's room was in the far corner of the ward, away from the more populated areas of the emergency wing. It was a small private space with just enough room for a hospital bed, a monitor, and a rolling IV stand. As Jenny reached for the door handle, the first thing she noticed was the faint but unmistakable scent, an odd, pungent smell that lingered in the air like damp metal mixed with spoiled fruit. She wrinkled her nose instinctively, but the odor was persistent, almost clinging to her senses. At first, Jenny thought it might be a chemical spill or some cleaning agent left behind by the janitorial staff, but when she opened the door, the smell became stronger. It wasn't an industrial scent, it was organic, unsettling, and off-putting in a way she couldn't quite place. Her training had taught her to trust her instincts, and right now, her gut was screaming that something was wrong. Jenny stepped inside the room, where she found Sarah lying motionless on the bed. The woman looked disheveled, her clothes wrinkled and stained as if she had been wearing them for days. Jenny took a moment to assess her from a distance. Sarah was in her mid-30s with smooth, deep brown skin, but her complexion looked unusually dull. Her eyes were half closed, and her breathing was shallow, with her chest rising and falling irregularly beneath the loose fabric of her shirt. "Good evening," Jenny said softly, trying not to startle her. "My name is Jenny. I'm a nurse, and I'm here to take care of you." Sarah made a faint noise in response, something between a sigh and a moan, but she didn't open her eyes fully. Her limbs were limp, and she seemed too weak to lift her head. Jenny moved closer to the bedside, her sharp gaze scanning Sarah's body for any visible signs of injury or illness. That was when she saw a series of yellowish stains spread across the front of Sarah's shirt and along the inside of her sleeves. Jenny's heart skipped a beat. The stains looked unnatural, as if they were seeping through the fabric rather than sitting on the surface. They had a greasy sheen to them, and the color was peculiar, dull and murky, with a hint of greenish tint under the harsh hospital lights. Jenny reached out carefully, lifting the edge of the fabric to get a better look without disturbing Sarah too much. The smell intensified as she did, making her stomach churn. Her mind raced through possible explanations. Was it bile? Could it be vomit? No, it didn't smell acidic enough for that. Blood? No, the stains lacked the dark, rusty hue of dried blood. Could it be some kind of chemical exposure? Perhaps Sarah had come into contact with a hazardous substance at work or at home. Jenny knew she needed to act fast. Something about this situation was screaming urgent, and she wasn't about to ignore it. Jenny grabbed a pair of gloves from the dispenser on the wall and slipped them on before checking Sarah's pulse. It was weak and irregular, her heart struggling to maintain a steady rhythm. A quick glance at the monitor confirmed Jenny's suspicion. Sarah's oxygen levels were dropping. She needed help, and she needed it immediately. "Hang in there, Sarah," Jenny whispered, more to herself than to the patient. She pressed the call button on the wall, hoping to summon a doctor or another nurse for assistance, but there was no immediate response. The emergency department was understaffed that night, as usual, and she knew it could take a few minutes for someone to arrive. Minutes Sarah didn't seem to have. Jenny leaned closer, trying to rouse Sarah. "Sarah, can you hear me? Do you know where you are?" she asked gently, her voice calm despite the growing knot of anxiety in her chest. Sarah's eyes flickered open for a brief second, but her gaze was unfocused, and she didn't seem to register Jenny's presence. Her lips parted slightly, as if she wanted to say something, but no words came out. Jenny noticed that her skin, normally rich and smooth, had taken on a yellowish pallor, another worrying sign. Jaundice? Jenny thought. Could this be a liver issue? But jaundice alone wouldn't explain the strange smell or the stains on her clothes. There was something more going on here, something she couldn't yet put her finger on. Jenny decided to check Sarah's medical history, hoping to find some clue. She pulled out the chart attached to the foot of the bed and scanned it quickly. No known allergies, no chronic conditions, no recent surgeries. Nothing that explained the current state of her health. The only note was that Sarah had been found unconscious at home by a neighbor, with no further details provided. Time was slipping away, and Jenny knew she had to make a decision. She couldn't wait for backup. Sarah's condition was deteriorating right in front of her. The smell, the stains, the irregular breathing, everything pointed to a medical emergency. Jenny's training kicked in, and she knew there was only one option left. She had to call 911. With her heart pounding in her chest, Jenny pulled out her phone and quickly dialed the emergency number. 911. What's your emergency? Came the calm voice on the other end of the line. This is Nurse Jenny Moore from Downtown General Hospital, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. I have a patient in critical condition. She's displaying unusual symptoms, irregular breathing, possible chemical exposure, and there's a strange smell coming from her. I need immediate assistance. The operator asked her a series of standard questions, and Jenny answered as best as she could while keeping an eye on Sarah's condition. Please hurry, Jenny added, unable to keep the urgency out of her voice. We're dispatching an ambulance now, the operator assured her. Help is on the way. Stay on the line with me until they arrive. Jenny exhaled a shaky breath, her heart still racing. She glanced back at Sarah, whose breathing was growing more labored by the second. The yellow stains on her shirt seemed to glow under the fluorescent lights, casting a sickly hue over the room. Jenny felt a knot of dread tighten in her stomach. She had seen her fair share of emergencies over the years, broken bones, heart attacks, allergic reactions, but this was different. This was something she had never encountered before, and that terrified her. As she waited for the ambulance to arrive, Jenny did her best to keep Sarah stable. She adjusted the bed to help her breathe more easily and checked the IV to ensure it was functioning properly. Every second felt like an eternity as she hovered by the bedside, her thoughts racing with worst-case scenarios. What if this was something contagious? What if Sarah was exposed to a dangerous toxin? Jenny knew she couldn't afford to panic, not when a life was on the line. She had to stay focused, had to keep fighting, even as fear gnawed at the edges of her composure. The sound of distant sirens broke the heavy silence, and Jenny felt a flicker of relief. Help was on the way. But deep down she knew that this was only the beginning of a long, complicated night, one that would test her skills, her instincts, and her courage in ways she never expected. The eerie scent lingered as Jenny kept a careful eye on Sarah. Every breath the patient took was strained, uneven, and weak. Jenny's initial worry had transformed into a gnawing certainty something was very wrong, far beyond the scope of exhaustion or dehydration. The yellow stains, the strange smell, the unsteady pulse, all these pieces hinted at something sinister lurking beneath the surface, but she didn't have enough clues to understand what it was. Come on, Sarah, Jenny whispered under her breath, adjusting the woman's IV line. She hoped to stimulate some sort of response, but Sarah remained disturbingly quiet, her face slack, and her eyes half open but devoid of focus. The hospital room, usually a refuge for healing, felt like a cold, sterile place filled with uncertainty. Jenny could hear the steady beep of the heart monitor in the background, though the rhythm wasn't as steady as she'd like. Sarah's pulse was irregular, with erratic beats that came in unpredictable bursts. It was as though her heart was struggling to keep up with whatever was happening inside her body. Jenny needed backup, and fast. She reached for the intercom button again, her finger pressing down harder than before, but there was no immediate response. She cursed silently. The emergency department was notorious for being understaffed during night shifts, and tonight was no different. Nurses were spread thin, doctors were tied up in other procedures, and every second of waiting felt like a weight pressing down on Jenny's chest. Still, she didn't have time to dwell on frustrations. She had to act. Jenny quickly scanned the room, thinking through her next steps. She couldn't simply sit and wait for someone to come. Sarah's condition was slipping, and whatever had caused these symptoms wasn't going to wait. She began by grabbing a flashlight from her pocket and gently lifting Sarah's eyelid. Her pupils were sluggish, slow to respond to light, a troubling sign. It indicated potential neurological involvement, possibly poisoning or a severe infection. A sense of urgency clawed at Jenny, but she kept her hands steady. She had learned long ago that panic was a nurse's worst enemy. Her mind worked methodically, running through possibilities. Liver failure? Maybe yellowish skin and confusion could fit. But what about the smell? The stains? These weren't symptoms of a typical illness. Could it be environmental poisoning? Sarah might have been exposed to something at work or at home, maybe a toxic substance or gas. But if that were the case, why hadn't the neighbor who found her reported anything unusual? Jenny made a mental note to get more details from the neighbor later if they were still around. For now, the patient in front of her was the priority. Jenny decided to take Sarah's temperature, hoping it might give her a clearer idea of what was going on. She reached for the thermometer and gently placed it under Sarah's arm, holding it in place. As she waited for the reading, Jenny leaned closer to inspect the stains on Sarah's clothing. They weren't just yellow, they had a slimy, greasy texture, almost like oil mixed with bile. A faint greenish tint clung to the edges of the fabric, and when Jenny brought the material closer to her face with gloved hands, the strange smell hit her again, sharp and nauseating. It was metallic, bitter, and faintly rotten, making her gag slightly. What could have caused this? The thermometer beeped, snapping Jenny back to the present. She glanced at the reading -103.8 def 39.9 deg C. Sarah had a high fever, which indicated some sort of infection or inflammatory response. But even that didn't fully explain the yellow stains or the strange odor. Jenny tried again to rouse Sarah, shaking her shoulder gently. "Sarah, can you hear me? I need you to try and wake up." Okay, her voice was calm but firm, hoping to break through whatever fog was holding Sarah captive. But there was barely any response, a slight groan, a flicker of her eyelids, and then silence again. Jenny's stomach twisted with dread. She had seen patients in bad shape before: accidents, heart attacks, overdoses, but this was different. This was a mystery wrapped in fear, and the unknown was terrifying. With no immediate backup available, Jenny knew she had to gather as much information as possible. She opened the chart clipped to the bed and reviewed it again, hoping she had missed something earlier. But the chart provided no new insights, no known allergies, no significant medical history, no medications that might explain her symptoms. Sarah's condition was as much a puzzle as before. Feeling the weight of the situation, Jenny decided to check Sarah's extremities. She pulled back the blanket and examined the woman's hands and feet, looking for any signs of swelling, bruising, or discoloration. Her hands were cold to the touch, with a slight bluish tint, cyanosis, a sign that her body wasn't getting enough oxygen. Jenny swore under her breath. Sarah's condition was deteriorating faster than she'd expected. She gently pressed on the nail beds of Sarah's fingers, watching how long it took for the color to return. It was sluggish, another indication that her circulation was compromised. She grabbed the stethoscope from around her neck and placed it against Sarah's chest, listening carefully to her heart and lungs. What she heard wasn't reassuring. Her heartbeat was weak and irregular, and there was a faint crackling sound in her lungs, a possible sign of fluid buildup. Jenny's hands trembled slightly as she pulled the stethoscope away. She was in over her head, and the weight of that realization was crushing. She needed a doctor, a specialist, someone who could piece together the strange symptoms before it was too late. She reached for the intercom again, slamming the button this time. "I need a doctor in room 14. Now," she barked, her voice sharp with urgency. Finally, there was a crackling response on the other end. "We'll send someone as soon as we can," came the distracted voice of a nurse at the other end of the ward. Jenny bit back a curse. It wasn't good enough. She needed help now. With no other option, Jenny grabbed her phone and called 911 again. "This is Jenny Moore from Downtown General," she said, her voice strained with desperation. "My patient's condition is worsening. I think we're dealing with possible chemical exposure or a severe infection. I need immediate medical backup and transport." The dispatcher on the other end responded calmly, but Jenny could hear the tension in her voice. "We've dispatched paramedics to your location. They should arrive within 5 minutes. Hang tight, Nurse Moore. You're doing great." Jenny hung up and exhaled slowly, trying to steady herself. 5 minutes felt like an eternity when someone's life was hanging by a thread. She returned to Sarah's side, adjusting the IV drip and repositioning her on the bed to make her more comfortable. "Stay with me," Jenny whispered. "Help is on the way. Just hang in there a little longer." Sarah's eyes fluttered briefly, and for a moment Jenny thought she saw a flicker of recognition, a spark of awareness. but it was gone as quickly as it came, leaving Sarah limp and unresponsive once more. Jenny sat on the edge of the bed, watching the rise and fall of Sarah's chest with bated breath. Every shallow breath felt like a countdown to something worse, something she couldn't prevent on her own. She hated the feeling of helplessness, the crushing weight of uncertainty that came with not knowing what was wrong. And yet she stayed. She stayed because that was what nurses did, stood by their patients, even when the odds were against them, even when the fear threatened to swallow them whole. The sound of approaching sirens echoed in the distance, a faint but welcome sign of hope. But Jenny knew that the hardest part was still ahead. Whatever had brought Sarah to this point wasn't going to be solved with a quick trip to the ER. This was just the beginning of a long, difficult road, one filled with questions, danger, and the relentless fight to save a life on the brink of slipping away. With trembling hands, Jenny grabbed her phone, her heart pounding in her chest. The dim light of the room felt oppressive, amplifying her anxiety. The stark reality of the situation settled over her like a heavy blanket. This wasn't just any emergency, this was a potential life or death scenario, and every second counted. She hit the call button for emergency services, her breath hitching slightly as she waited for the familiar voice on the other end. The ringing seemed to echo in the silence of the room, each tone a reminder of how precarious Sarah's condition was. Finally, the call connected. 911. What's your emergency? The operator's voice came through, calm yet urgent. This is Jenny Carter, a nurse at St. Mary's Hospital, she said, her voice slightly shaky but resolute. We have a patient here, Sarah Thompson. She's exhibiting unusual symptoms, a strange odor, possible chemical exposure, and yellow stains on her clothing. Can you describe the symptoms in detail? The operator asked, maintaining her professionalism, which offered Jenny a sliver of comfort. She's lethargic, barely responsive, and her vital signs are deteriorating. There's a strong metallic smell in the room, and I'm worried it could be some sort of poisoning. Her skin is pale, almost jaundiced, Jenny explained, her words tumbling out in a rush. She could hear the urgency in her own voice, a reflection of the rising panic in her chest. Stay calm, Jenny. We're dispatching an ambulance to your location. Can you provide the address? Jenny quickly rattled off the hospital's address, the details coming back to her like a mantra. It's 1200 South Main Street, room 203. She could hear the operator typing in the background, and a sense of urgency washed over her as she mentally prepared for the next steps. Is there anyone else with you? The operator inquired. I'm alone in the room with her. I need to keep monitoring her, but I'm not sure how much longer she can hold on, Jenny replied, glancing at Sarah. The woman's eyelids fluttered, her breath shallow and labored. Jenny felt a rush of fear. Was she going to lose her patient? Okay, I need you to stay with her and try to keep her conscious. Talk to her, she might respond to your voice, the operator advised. Jenny swallowed hard, her throat dry. She stepped closer to Sarah, willing herself to sound calm. Sarah, can you hear me? I'm right here. I need you to focus on my voice. You're going to be okay, help is on the way. For a fleeting moment, Jenny thought she saw recognition in Sarah's eyes. They were clouded and distant, but there was a flicker of awareness. I don't feel good, Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible. I know, but I need you to hang in there. Just keep breathing, nice and slow, Jenny encouraged, her voice steady despite the chaos swirling in her mind. We're going to get you the help you need. Can't. Breathe, Sarah gasped, her face contorting in discomfort. Panic surged within Jenny as she reached for Sarah's wrist to check her pulse again. It was weak and erratic, sending alarm bells ringing in her head. Stay with me, Sarah. Just focus on my voice, Jenny repeated, feeling a wave of desperation wash over her. She could hear the faint sound of sirens approaching in the distance, a small glimmer of hope in the otherwise dark situation. The operator's voice broke through her thoughts again. Jenny, are you still there? Yes, I'm here. The ambulance is on its way, she asked, her voice tinged with urgency. Absolutely. They're about 5 minutes out. You're doing great. Keep monitoring her vitals. Do you have an automated external defibrillator aid nearby? The operator questioned. Yes, I believe there's one in the hallway. But I don't think we're there yet. She's still breathing, Jenny replied, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down on her. Good. If her breathing worsens or she loses consciousness, you'll need to start CPR. I can guide you through it if necessary, the operator assured her. Jenny took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. Okay, just keep talking to me. What should I do now? Keep talking to her. Encourage her to stay awake. Keep her head elevated if possible. And if her breathing changes at all, let me know immediately, the operator instructed. Understood, Jenny said, her voice firm. She turned her focus back to Sarah, who was drifting further away. Sarah, please stay with me. You're doing so well. The ambulance is almost here, and they're going to take care of you. She gently brushed Sarah's hair back from her face, her heart aching at the sight of her patient's fragility. Jenny could feel the warmth of Sarah's skin, but it was tainted with an unusual coldness that sent chills down her spine. Just a little longer, Sarah. You're not alone, Jenny whispered, trying to infuse her voice with as much strength as she could muster. You're so strong. Just keep fighting. Sarah blinked slowly, her eyes struggling to focus. I'm scared, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I know, but you're safe here. I'm right with you. And soon the paramedics will be here to help you, Jenny reassured her, her heart breaking for the woman in front of her. Just focus on my voice. A moment of silence hung in the air, filled only with the soft sound of Sarah's labored breathing, and the distant wail of sirens growing louder. The tension in the room felt almost palpable, a heavy weight that pressed down on both women. Jenny was hyper-aware of every sound, the soft rustle of Sarah's sheets, the ticking clock on the wall, and the faint echo of footsteps in the corridor. Finally, the ambulance crew burst through the door, a flurry of motion and energy. Jenny stepped aside, allowing them to assess the situation. She's not responsive, but she's breathing. Albeit weakly, Jenny informed them, her voice steady even as her insides churned with anxiety. I've called for help, and I'm monitoring her vitals. The lead paramedic, a tall man with sharp features and an air of authority, nodded as he quickly moved to Sarah's side. We're here to take over, Jenny. You did the right thing by calling us. Let's get her stabilized. Jenny felt a rush of relief wash over her as the team sprang into action. They worked swiftly and efficiently, checking Sarah's vitals and connecting her to a portable monitor. The familiar sounds of beeping machines filled the room, a symphony of urgency that reassured Jenny that they were in good hands. As the paramedics prepared to transport Sarah, Jenny felt a sense of pride in her instincts. She had acted quickly, not allowing fear to paralyze her, and that decision could have saved Sarah's life. But just as quickly, a wave of guilt washed over her. Had she done enough? Had she missed any signs? The lead paramedic caught her eye, sensing her turmoil. You did everything you could. We'll take it from here, he assured her, his voice calm and steady. Jenny nodded, though the knot in her stomach remained. I didn't want to lose her, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. You won't. We're going to get her the care she needs, he said firmly. And with that, they wheeled Sarah out of the room, leaving Jenny standing in the doorway, watching as they rushed her to the waiting ambulance. As the crew loaded Sarah into the vehicle, Jenny took a deep breath, feeling the adrenaline coursing through her veins. She had acted instinctively, but there was still a sense of uncertainty lingering in the air. Would they find out what had caused Sarah's symptoms? Would she be okay? The ambulance doors closed with a heavy thud, sealing Sarah away for the moment. Jenny felt a mix of hope and dread. She knew the battle was far from over. As she stepped back into the hospital, her heart heavy with concern for her patient, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of a much larger mystery. The sterile smell of antiseptic hung heavily in the air as Jenny stood at the edge of the emergency room, her mind racing. She had watched the ambulance depart with Sarah, and now she was left with the haunting images of her patient's frail condition. Time seemed to stretch, each second ticking by like an eternity, and the sense of urgency enveloped her like a fog. The emergency room buzzed with activity, doctors and nurses moving swiftly to attend to other patients, yet Jenny felt frozen in place. The fluorescent lights overhead hummed softly, and the cacophony of alarms and medical chatter created a dissonant symphony that mirrored her internal turmoil. She knew she needed to gather herself, but the weight of what had just transpired was overwhelming. A voice broke through her thoughts. Jenny. What happened? It was Mark, a fellow nurse and close friend. He had been working a nearby shift and rushed to find her after hearing about the emergency. They think Sarah might have been poisoned, Jenny replied, her voice trembling slightly. There was a strange smell in her room, and she had these yellow stains on her clothes. I can't shake this feeling that it's something serious. Mark's expression shifted from concern to focus. Have you heard anything from the paramedics? Did they find out anything before they left? No, they didn't have much time to talk. They were in a hurry, but they mentioned the possibility of chemical exposure or a severe infection, Jenny explained, running a hand through her hair in frustration. I should have done more. What if I missed something? What if it's too late? Hey, you did everything you could, you acted fast, and that's what matters, Mark reassured her, placing a hand on her shoulder. We need to stay focused. Is there anything we can do to help? Jenny nodded, appreciating his support. We should check in with the ER team. Maybe they'll have updates on Sarah's condition. And I want to see if there are any reports from her workplace that could shed light on this. Together, they moved through the bustling emergency department, weaving in and out of the crowd of medical staff. The tension was palpable, with the gravity of each situation weighing heavily on everyone. Jenny's heart raced as they approached the nurses' station, where Dr. Lee, the attending physician, was reviewing patient charts. Dr. Lee, Jenny called out, her voice cutting through the noise. The doctor looked up, her brow furrowing in concern. Jenny, what's going on? Dr. Lee asked, sensing the urgency in Jenny's tone. Have you heard anything about Sarah Thompson? The woman who was brought in with possible poisoning, Jenny inquired, desperation creeping into her voice. Dr. Lee sighed, rubbing her temples as if to ward off a headache. I was just about to check on her. We're running some tests, but it's too early for results. Her condition is serious, but we're doing everything we can. Jenny felt a surge of frustration. But what if it's something that could be treated now? What if it's a chemical exposure that we can address immediately? Jenny, I understand your concern, but we need to let the doctors in the ER do their job. They're experienced and they have protocols in place for situations like this, Dr. Lee said, her tone calming but firm. You need to take a step back for a moment. Let's not rush to conclusions without evidence. Reluctantly, Jenny nodded, though she felt the familiar sense of helplessness creeping in. I just feel like I could have done more, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. You did your best, Mark chimed in. You acted quickly. And that's the most important thing. Now let's get more information. Maybe we can find out about the exposure later. With a deep breath, Jenny focused on the task at hand. She and Mark decided to split up. While Mark went to gather more information from the ER team, Jenny headed to the break room to see if there were any updates or reports about Sarah's workplace. As she stepped into the break room, the walls felt like they were closing in. The space was small and cluttered, filled with tired nurses sipping coffee and reviewing charts. She grabbed a cup of coffee herself, hoping the caffeine would jolt her senses into sharper focus. The coffee machine gurgled, and the familiar aroma offered a small measure of comfort in the midst of her anxiety. Jenny pulled out her phone and scrolled through her contacts, looking for Sarah's emergency contact. The woman had mentioned a coworker named Mia when Jenny first checked on her, and she hoped Mia might know something about Sarah's recent activities or any hazardous situations at their workplace. After a few rings, Mia answered, her voice breathless and laced with concern. Hello. Mia, it's Jenny from the hospital. I'm calling about Sarah Thompson. She was just brought in with serious symptoms, and I need to know if there's anything at work that could have caused this, Jenny explained, her urgency evident in her tone. What? Oh my God, what happened to Sarah? Mia replied, panic creeping into her voice. We're still figuring that out, but there's a possibility she was exposed to something toxic. Have there been any incidents at work recently? Any chemicals or hazards she might have come into contact with? Jenny pressed. No, not that I know of, Mia responded, her voice shaky. But we did receive a new shipment of cleaning supplies a few days ago. They were labeled as environmentally friendly, but I didn't think much of it at the time. Sarah mentioned feeling a little dizzy after using them, but we all just thought it was exhaustion. We've been so busy lately. Jenny's heart raced. Do you know what chemicals were in those supplies? It might be important for us to figure this out quickly. I can check. Give me a second, Mia replied, her voice muffled as she moved away from the phone. Jenny could hear her rustling papers, and the sound heightened her sense of urgency. After a moment, Mia returned to the line. It looks like the supplier sent over a batch of concentrated cleaning agents. They were supposed to be diluted before use, but I don't know if everyone followed the instructions. There was also a note about a potential allergic reaction for some people, but it didn't mention anything serious. That could be it. It's possible Sarah was exposed to a higher concentration than what was safe, Jenny said, her mind racing. Please send me any documentation you can find about those cleaning supplies, along with the safety data sheets. It could help us identify what's going on. I'll send it right away, Mia promised, her voice still shaking. I just hope Sarah is okay. Me too. Thank you for your help, Mia. I'll keep you updated, Jenny said before hanging up, her mind already formulating a plan. As she returned to the main area of the hospital, her thoughts raced. If the cleaning supplies were indeed the cause of Sarah's symptoms, they would need to act quickly to treat her and prevent any further exposure. When she reached the nurse's station, Mark was waiting for her, his expression a mix of concern and relief. I just spoke with the ER team. They're doing everything they can, but they're still waiting for lab results. What do you have? Sarah's coworker mentioned some new cleaning supplies they received that were concentrated and might not have been diluted properly. There could be a connection, Jenny explained, urgency lacing her words. If we can get the safety data sheets from her workplace, it could give us insight into what she was exposed to. Mark nodded, his eyes widening with understanding. Let's get on it. We need to ensure that the ER team knows about this as soon as possible. Every second counts. The two of them quickly moved back to Dr. Lee, who was deep in conversation with another doctor. Jenny tapped her shoulder gently, drawing her attention. Dr. Lee, we think we might have identified a possible source of Sarah's symptoms. What do you have? Dr. Lee asked, her tone shifting to one of urgency. Jenny explained the situation with the cleaning supplies, highlighting the potential risks associated with the concentrated agents. We need to act fast. If there's a chance she was exposed to something toxic, we have to inform the lab team immediately. Dr. Lee's eyes narrowed as she absorbed the information. You're right. Let's notify the lab and ensure they test for those specific chemicals. Good job, Jenny. You may have just caught this in time. As Dr. Lee began relaying orders to the lab staff, Jenny felt a rush of adrenaline. For the first time since Sarah had been admitted, she felt a sense of purpose. They were actively working to uncover the truth behind Sarah's condition, and it felt empowering to be part of the solution. While Dr. Lee coordinated with the lab, Jenny and Mark waited anxiously. The minutes felt like hours, the tension in the room thickening with each passing second. Nurses and doctors continued to rush past them, each engrossed in their tasks, but Jenny's focus remained on Sarah. Finally, Dr. Lee returned, her expression serious. They're starting the test based on the information you provided, but we still need to wait for results. In the meantime, we should prepare for any further complications. If this is indeed a case of chemical exposure, we need to be ready for potential allergic reactions or respiratory distress. Jenny's heart sank at the thought. What can we do in the meantime? How do we keep Sarah stable? We'll monitor her vitals closely and provide supportive care. If necessary, we may need to administer oxygen or other treatments once we have more information. Let's also make sure we have the antidotes on hand in case they are needed, Doctor Lee instructed, her authority evident. As the team mobilized, Jenny felt a mix of determination and dread. They were doing everything they could, but the uncertainty loomed over them like a dark cloud. The fear of losing Sarah was a constant ache in her chest, and she could feel her resolve strengthening. Hours passed in a blur of activity. The emergency room continued to buzz with patients coming and going, but Jenny remained focused on Sarah's case. She and Mark took turns monitoring the lab updates, their anticipation growing with every passing minute. Finally, a lab technician approached them, her expression serious. We have preliminary results on the tests for the cleaning agents. What did you find? Dr. Lee asked, her voice steady. There are elevated levels of a chemical compound commonly used in concentrated cleaning supplies. It can cause severe respiratory distress and has been linked to other symptoms, including neurological effects, the technician explained. Jenny felt her stomach drop. Is it treatable? Yes, but we need to act fast. We'll administer the appropriate antidotes and monitor her closely for any signs of anaphylaxis or respiratory failure, the technician confirmed. Dr. Lee nodded, her expression steely. Let's move. Jenny, I want you to assist in the treatment. Mark, keep an eye on the other patients and be ready to call for help if we need it. Understood, Mark replied, his voice filled with urgency as he moved to gather supplies. As Jenny and Dr. Lee rushed back to Sarah's room, a sense of determination surged within her. They had identified the problem, and now they had a chance to save Sarah's life. When they entered the room, the atmosphere was tense. Sarah lay on the hospital bed, her breathing shallow and labored. Monitors beeped steadily, displaying concerning numbers that made Jenny's heart race. The team quickly moved into action, preparing the necessary treatments. Jenny, I need you to set up the IV fluids, Dr. Lee instructed, her voice calm but commanding. We need to stabilize her as much as possible before administering the antidote. Jenny's hands moved swiftly, her training kicking in as she worked to set up the IV line. She could feel the weight of the moment, the urgency coursing through her veins. This was a pivotal point for Sarah, and she was determined to make a difference. With the IV fluids in place, Dr. Lee began administering the antidote, her focus unwavering. Jenny monitored Sarah's vitals, the beeping of the machines a reminder of the gravity of the situation. As they worked, the tension in the room was palpable. Each second felt like an eternity, and the uncertainty of Sarah's condition hung heavy in the air. Jenny held her breath, willing her patient to pull through. Slowly, Sarah's breathing began to stabilize, and Jenny felt a glimmer of hope. The beeping machine started to show more encouraging numbers, and for the first time she felt a sense of relief wash over her. After what felt like an eternity, Dr. Lee stepped back, wiping her brow with a sense of accomplishment. "We did it. She's responding to the treatment," she said, a hint of a smile creeping onto her lips. Jenny couldn't help but smile back, her heart swelling with gratitude. "Thank you, Dr. Lee. I couldn't have done it without your guidance." "Don't thank me yet. We need to continue monitoring her closely." "The next few hours will be crucial," Dr. Lee replied, her expression serious again. "But you did a great job, Jenny. You kept your cool under pressure." As they settled in to monitor Sarah's progress, Jenny felt a renewed sense of purpose. They had faced a daunting challenge together, and for the first time she felt confident in her ability to navigate the uncertainty of her profession. The atmosphere in the hospital was charged with a sense of urgency as Jenny and the medical team monitored Sarah's condition. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered intermittently, casting a harsh glow on the bustling emergency room. Outside, the sun began to set, its dying light filtering through the windows, creating an eerie juxtaposition between the calm of dusk and the chaos of the hospital. Sarah lay in the hospital bed, her pale face gradually regaining some color as the antidote took effect. The beeping of the monitors that had once echoed her struggles now sounded a steady rhythm, signaling that she was stabilizing. Jenny felt a wave of relief wash over her, but she knew that the danger wasn't over yet. Dr. Lee stood at the foot of the bed, reviewing Sarah's chart and jotting down notes with precision. "We need to keep a close eye on her vitals for the next few hours. If she shows any signs of respiratory distress or anaphylaxis, we'll need to intervene quickly," she instructed, her tone authoritative yet calm. Jenny nodded, her heart still racing as she remembered the anxiety of the last few hours. She had been caught in the whirlwind of uncertainty, but now, with Sarah's condition improving, her focus sharpened. What are the next steps? Should we call for the toxicology department to run additional tests? Yes, definitely. They'll want to know the specifics of what she was exposed to. We also need to document everything we've done so far, Dr. Lee replied, glancing at Jenny. "You've been doing an excellent job today. Your instincts were right on point." "Thank you, Dr. Lee," Jenny said, feeling a sense of pride swelling within her. "I just hope we can prevent this from happening again, not just for Sarah, but for anyone else who might be at risk." As they prepared to gather the necessary documentation, the door swung open, and a tall figure entered the room. It was Mia, Sarah's co-worker, her face a mask of concern. "Is Sarah okay?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I've been worried sick since I heard what happened. She's stable for now, but we're still monitoring her closely," Jenny reassured her. "Can you tell me more about those cleaning supplies? We need to understand exactly what happened at your workplace." Mia nodded, her hands fidgeting with the hem of her shirt. "I'll go get the safety data sheets and any other information I can find. I just can't believe this happened. We've used those supplies before without issue, but this batch felt different. There was a strong chemical smell, and I remember Sarah mentioning a headache after using them." Jenny's heart sank. The situation was more serious than she had anticipated. "That's crucial information, Mia. If the cleaning supplies were improperly labeled or concentrated, it could put others at risk. We need to alert the authorities." As Mia hurried off to gather more information, Jenny returned her focus to Sarah. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was an unseen danger lurking just beneath the surface of this incident. What if Sarah wasn't the only one affected? What if there were others at the workplace experiencing similar symptoms? "Dr. Lee, I think we should consider reaching out to the local health department," Jenny suggested. "If these cleaning supplies are dangerous, they need to be investigated before anyone else gets hurt." Agreed, Dr. Lee replied, her expression serious. I'll make the call. In the meantime, I want you to help Mia gather any reports or documentation from Sarah's workplace that can give us insight into the situation. As Dr. Lee stepped out to make the call, Jenny took a deep breath, steeling herself for the task ahead. She felt a renewed sense of purpose. This wasn't just about saving Sarah anymore. It was about uncovering a potential threat that could endanger countless others. Moments later, Mia returned, clutching a stack of papers. Here they are, she said, her voice shaky but determined. These are the safety data sheets for the cleaning supplies we received, along with the delivery invoice. Jenny took the documents, her fingers trembling with anticipation. She began flipping through the pages, searching for any information that could provide insight into the chemicals involved. As she read through the sheets, her heart sank further. The cleaning agents listed included compounds known to cause severe respiratory issues and neurological symptoms if not handled properly. This isn't good, Jenny murmured, showing the sheets to Mia. These chemicals are highly concentrated and require strict safety precautions. If anyone on your team used them without proper dilution, it could have serious consequences. Mia's eyes widened in horror. I can't believe this. We had no idea it was that dangerous. We always thought they were safe because the supplier marketed them as environmentally friendly. It's misleading marketing. And it could have serious repercussions, Jenny replied, her mind racing. We need to report this to the health department immediately. This could be a larger issue than just Sarah's case. Just then, Dr. Lee returned, her expression grave. I've contacted the local health department, and they're sending a team to investigate. They'll want to speak with you, Mia, about what happened at your workplace. Mia nodded, tears welling in her eyes. I'll do whatever I can to help. I just want to make sure Sarah and everyone else are safe. As the three of them gathered around the hospital bed, Sarah began to stir. Her eyelids fluttered open, and she squinted at the bright lights above. What? What happened? She whispered, her voice weak and raspy. You're in the hospital, Sarah. You had a reaction to some cleaning supplies at work, Jenny explained gently, hoping to provide some comfort. But you're stable now, and we're doing everything we can to help you. Sarah blinked slowly, processing the information. I didn't mean to cause any trouble, she murmured, her voice filled with guilt. I thought it was just stress. I didn't want to worry anyone. It's not your fault, Sarah, Mia interjected, her voice firm. You had no way of knowing those supplies were dangerous. We need to make sure this doesn't happen to anyone else. Dr. Lee nodded in agreement. We're going to ensure that your case is taken seriously. We'll work together to investigate this situation and prevent further incidents. Sarah looked between the three of them, a flicker of gratitude in her eyes. Thank you for being here. I didn't think anyone would care. You're not alone in this, Sarah, Jenny assured her, her heart swelling with empathy. We're in this together. As the conversation continued, Jenny felt a sense of solidarity growing among them. They were all part of a larger battle against an unseen danger that had crept into their lives. It was no longer just about one patient, it was about the health and safety of an entire community. After several more minutes of discussion, a nurse entered the room, interrupting their moment. Dr. Lee, we have a situation in the triage area. A group of people from Sarah's workplace have come in reporting similar symptoms, she said, her expression urgent. Dr. Lee's eyes widened. This is what we feared. Jenny, Mia, we need to move now. We have to address this before it spirals out of control. Jenny's heart raced as they followed Dr. Lee out of the room. The emergency department was now filled with individuals who had begun to show similar signs of distress. The atmosphere shifted from a focus on Sarah to a more chaotic scene as nurses and doctors mobilized to assess the incoming patients. As they reached the triage area, Jenny felt a wave of determination surge within her. They were on the front line of a potential crisis, and she knew she had to do everything in her power to help those who had been affected. The stakes were higher than ever, and she was ready to face the unseen danger that had infiltrated their lives. Let's split up and start assessing patients, Dr. Lee instructed, her voice steady amidst the chaos. We need to identify any common symptoms and ensure that everyone is receiving appropriate care. Jenny took a deep breath, channeling her anxiety into action. She and Mia moved to the first patient, a middle-aged man with labored breathing. What's going on? Jenny asked, her tone calm as she began to assess his condition. I started feeling dizzy at work. Then I had trouble breathing, he said, his voice shaky. A few of my coworkers are experiencing the same thing. Jenny exchanged a worried glance with Mia. Have you been using any cleaning supplies recently? Anything new or different? Yes, we just got a new shipment, and the man replied, a look of realization crossing his face. It's those cleaning products. I thought they were safe, but now I'm not so sure.